The situation at the roadside quickly went from bad to worse. Maya stood shivering in the cold night air, her doctor's coat offering little protection against the bitter wind. The flashing police lights painted everything in alternating red and blue, making the scene feel even more surreal. "I don't care if you're the Queen of England," Officer Turner sneered, his face twisted with unnecessary anger. "When I give you an order, you follow it immediately." His partner, Officer Wilson, maintained his position, watching the scene unfold with an unsettling smirk. Maya took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. "Officer, I understand you're doing your job, but I've done nothing wrong. I'm a doctor at Metropolitan Hospital." She gestured toward her scrubs and the medical ID hanging around her neck. "I just finished saving a child's life. You can call the hospital to verify." "Oh, now you're giving me orders." Turner cut her off, stepping closer. His breath smelled of coffee and hostility. "Put your hands where I can see them." Maya's hands were already raised, but she lifted them higher, her medical ID badge swinging from her neck. The same badge that had granted her access to operating rooms just hours ago now seemed useless in the face of such unwarranted aggression. "I'm reaching for my phone," she said clearly, moving her hand slowly toward her pocket. "I'd like to call my husband. He's a police." "She's reaching," Wilson suddenly shouted, springing into action from the passenger side. Before Maya could blink, both officers rushed her, though she hadn't made any threatening movements. The next few moments were a blur of emotion and fear. Maya felt her cheek press against the cold metal of her car as they roughly grabbed her arms. Her years of maintaining composure in high-pressure surgeries helped her stay calm, even as panic threatened to overwhelm her. "Please," she managed to say, her voice muffled against the car. "My ID badge. Just look at my ID badge. Call the hospital. Call my husband. He's captain." "Oh, now your husband's a captain." Turner laughed mockingly. "Next, you'll tell us you're the mayor's daughter too, right?" The cold steel of handcuffs bit into her wrists as he roughly cuffed her hands behind her back. A small crowd had begun to gather at the nearby gas station, several people holding up their phones, recording the scene. Maya could hear their murmurs of concern and outrage, but the officers seemed unfazed by the witnesses. "This is completely unnecessary," Maya said, maintaining her dignity despite the humiliation. "I was simply driving home from work. Check my credentials. Call the hospital. There are proper ways to handle this situation." Wilson began roughly searching through her purse, tossing her medical equipment and papers onto the ground. Her stethoscope, the one her husband had given her for their anniversary, clattered onto the pavement. Well, what do we have here?" Turner said, picking up a prescription pad that had fallen from her bag. "Writing yourself some prescriptions, doctor." His tone dripped with sarcasm. "Those are for my pediatric patients," Maya explained, her professional calm starting to crack. "Everything in that bag is standard medical equipment. If you just take a moment to verify." "Save it for the station," Turner interrupted, yanking her away from the car. "You can explain all about your important doctor job and your police captain husband to the booking officer." As they led her to the patrol car, Maya caught sight of her reflection in the window. Her neat appearance from earlier was gone, her hair had come loose, her scrubs were wrinkled, and there was a small cut on her cheek from being pressed against the car. But what struck her most was the look in her eyes, not fear, but determination. These officers had no idea what they had just set in motion. A young woman from the crowd called out, "I've got it all on video, doctor. Don't worry." Maya managed a small nod of acknowledgement as the officers pushed her into the back of their patrol car. She knew that soon enough, her husband would learn about this incident, and Captain Rajkumar was not a man who took abuse of power lightly. The patrol car door slammed shut, and Maya sat in the darkness, her wrists aching from the tight handcuffs. As they pulled away from the scene, she closed her eyes and took steady breaths, the same way she did before beginning a difficult surgery. This night was far from over, and she knew that soon these officers would realize just how badly they had misjudged the situation. The police station was buzzing with activity despite the late hour. As officers Turner and Wilson marched Maya through the entrance, several desk officers looked up from their paperwork. A few of them seemed to recognize something familiar about her, but in her disheveled state, none made the connection. "Got a speeder who thinks she's too important for traffic laws," Turner announced loudly, pushing Maya toward the booking desk. "Claims she's some big-shot doctor married to a captain." He laughed, and a few officers joined in, though some looked uncomfortable with his rough handling a woman in medical scrubs. The booking officer, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, looked at Maya with concern. "Name?" she asked, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Dr. Maya Kumar," she replied clearly, standing as tall as she could despite her handcuffs. "I'm a pediatric surgeon at Metropolitan Hospital, and I'd like to make my phone call now." Turner snorted. "Yeah, and I'm the chief of police. Book her for resisting arrest and disorderly conduct, too." The booking officer frowned, her fingers pausing over the keyboard. Something about the name Kumar triggered a memory, but before she could place it, Turner interrupted. "Come on, speed it up. We don't have all night," he barked, giving Maya another unnecessary push toward the bench where they processed new arrivals. As they took her fingerprints, Maya winced at the rough handling. Her wrists were already showing signs of bruising from the overly tight handcuffs. A young officer passing by noticed her medical ID badge, still hanging around her neck, and did a double take. "Wait," he started to say, "isn't she?" "Mind your own business, rookie," Wilson cut him off sharply. The young officer backed away, but not before pulling out his phone and quickly typing something. Maya sat on the hard bench, her hands still cuffed behind her back. The events of the night felt surreal. Just hours ago, she'd been saving a child's life in surgery, and now she was being treated like a common criminal. She thought about her husband, probably worried sick by now. Her shift had ended hours ago. "Please," she tried one more time, addressing the booking officer. "Just check my credentials. Or call the hospital. Or better yet, call Captain Kumar in Internal Affairs. He's my—" "Oh, give it a rest," Turner snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. Several officers nearby jumped at the sound. "Still playing that 'my husband's a captain' card? You know what? Just for that, you can wait a bit longer for your phone call." The booking officer looked increasingly troubled. "Officer Turner, perhaps we should—" "Perhaps you should do your job and process her," Wilson interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Maya closed her eyes, drawing on her years of experience staying calm in crisis situations. She could feel the stares of other officers and staff, some curious, others concerned. The young officer from earlier had disappeared down a hallway, still typing on his phone. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the far end of the station. Doors burst open, and a commanding voice cut through the noise of the precinct like a knife through butter. "Where's my wife?" The entire station fell silent. Maya opened her eyes to see her husband, Captain Rajkumar, standing in the doorway, his presence filling the room. He was still in his suit from work, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The look on his face was one she'd never seen before, a mixture of fury and controlled rage that made even the most hardened officers take a step back. Officers Turner and Wilson turned toward the voice, their faces showing the first hints of uncertainty. The booking officer's eyes widened in recognition, and she quickly began typing something in her computer. "I said," Captain Kumar repeated, his voice deadly quiet as he scanned the room, "where is my wife?" The silence in the station was deafening. Maya watched as the color drained from Turner and Wilson's faces as realization dawned on them. They had just spent the last hour roughing up and mocking the wife of one of the most respected and feared captains in internal affairs. The young officer who had disappeared earlier reappeared behind Captain Kumar, looking both nervous and satisfied. He had done what any good officer would do: alert the proper authorities when witnessing an injustice. As her husband's eyes finally found her, Maya saw his expression shift from anger to concern, then back to controlled fury as he took in her disheveled appearance and the handcuffs. The night was about to take a very different turn, and by the looks on their faces, Officers Turner and Wilson were finally beginning to understand just how badly they had miscalculated. The atmosphere in the police station changed instantly with Captain Kumar's arrival. The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder in the heavy silence. Officers who had been lounging at their desks suddenly sat up straight, paperwork forgotten in their hands. Captain Kumar walked slowly toward the booking area, each step deliberate and measured. His normally friendly face was set in stone, his eyes fixed on his wife's condition. The bruises forming on her wrists from the tight handcuffs, the small cut on her cheek, her wrinkled scrubs, he took in every detail. "Remove those handcuffs," he ordered quietly. When neither Turner nor Wilson moved, his voice took on an edge that made everyone in the room flinch. "Now." Wilson fumbled with the keys, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. His hands shook so badly that he dropped the keys twice before managing to unlock the handcuffs. Maya rubbed her wrists gently, the relief visible on her face. "Would someone like to explain?" Captain Kumar continued, his calm voice somehow more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. "Why my wife, a respected pediatric surgeon, is sitting here in handcuffs after completing emergency surgery?" Turner stepped forward, his earlier confidence replaced by nervous energy. "Sir, we didn't know she was your—" "That's not what I asked, Officer Turner," Kumar cut him off. "I want to know why any citizen, regardless of who they're married to, would be treated this way." He picked up Maya's stethoscope from the evidence bag, the one he'd given her as an anniversary gift. "I want to know why a medical professional in scrubs, with proper identification, was handled so roughly that she has visible injuries." The booking officer, who had been quietly typing away, spoke up. "Sir, I've pulled up the dash cam footage from their patrol car. You'll want to see this." Kumar nodded. "Send it to my office. Right now, I want every piece of evidence logged, every witness statement recorded, and every second of this incident documented." He turned to the young officer who had alerted him. "Officer Chen, please take my wife's statement in my office. And call the medical examiner. I want those injuries photographed and documented." "Captain?" Turner tried again, sweat visible on his forehead. "This is all just a misunderstanding. We were following protocol." "Protocol?" Kumar's voice could have frozen water. "Please explain which protocol calls for ignoring medical identification, refusing to verify employment, and using excessive force on a compliant citizen." He stepped closer to Turner. "Or perhaps you can point me to the section that allows officers to mock and dismiss someone's legitimate attempts to identify themselves." The entire station watched in tense silence. Several officers who had witnessed the booking process were already writing their statements, knowing they'd be called upon soon enough. Maya stood up from the bench, her professional dignity intact despite everything. "The child I operated on tonight," she said, her voice clear and steady, "was the same age as your daughter, Officer Turner. While you were making jokes about my credentials, his parents were waiting to hear if he would survive." She straightened her scrubs. "That's what I was trying to tell you during the traffic stop, before you decided I was lying." Turner's face went pale as the weight of his actions started to sink in. The mention of his own child seemed to finally break through his arrogant facade. "Officer Chen," Kumar said, not taking his eyes off Turner and Wilson, "please escort Dr. Kumar to my office. And send in Detective Rodriguez. We'll need internal affairs to handle this investigation properly." He turned to the booking officer. "I want every complaint ever filed against these officers on my desk within the hour." As Maya walked away with Officer Chen, the young officer who had alerted her husband, she heard Captain Kumar addressing the entire station. "Let this be a lesson," he said, his voice carrying through the pin-drop silence. "The badge we wear is a symbol of public trust, not personal power. Tonight, that trust was betrayed, not just against my wife, but against every citizen who expects fair treatment from law enforcement." The night shift had just witnessed something they would talk about for years to come. A turning point where justice wasn't just a word in a manual, but a reality that reached even those who thought they were above it. For Officers Turner and Wilson, their night of power tripping had just turned into the beginning of a very thorough investigation, one that would reshape not just their careers, but the entire department's approach to civilian interaction. Inside Captain Kumar's office, the atmosphere was tense but controlled. Maya sat in a comfortable chair, holding an ice pack to her wrist, while Officer Chen carefully photographed her injuries. The young officer's hands were steady, but his face showed clear disapproval at what his fellow officers had done. The bruising pattern here clearly shows the handcuffs were far tighter than regulation. Officer Chen noted, his voice professional as he documented each mark. The camera clicked softly as he captured another angle. Detective Rodriguez, a seasoned internal affairs investigator, sat across the desk reviewing the dashcam footage on his laptop. His expression grew darker with each passing minute. "Dr. Kumar, could you walk us through what happened when they first approached your vehicle?" Before Maya could answer, a gentle knock interrupted them. A nurse from Metropolitan Hospital entered, carrying Maya's spare set of scrubs and her personal effects. "Dr. Kumar, the entire emergency department is talking about what happened. That child you operated on. His parents want to make statements about your character." Maya managed a small smile. "Thank you, but please make sure they focus on their son's recovery right now." The nurse nodded and left, leaving behind a reminder of the real work Maya should have been doing instead of dealing with this situation. Meanwhile, in the main area of the station, Captain Kumar was conducting his own investigation. The booking officer had pulled up Turner and Wilson's service records on her computer. "Sir," she said, her voice concerned, "I found something interesting. There are multiple civilian complaints against both officers, but most were dismissed without proper investigation. The pattern is troubling." Kumar leaned over to look at the screen, his jaw tightening. "Cross-reference these complaints with traffic stop data from the past year. I want to know if there's a pattern in who they're targeting." The evidence was mounting quickly. Other officers, perhaps inspired by the night's events, began coming forward with their own observations of Turner and Wilson's behavior. A senior surgeon approached Kumar with a thick folder. "Captain," he said quietly, "I've been keeping my own records of incidents I've witnessed. I should have reported them sooner, but—" He trailed off, the regret evident in his voice. Back in Kumar's office, Maya was finishing her official statement. Her voice remained steady as she described the unnecessary escalation, the ignored attempts to identify herself, and the excessive force used. Officer Chen typed quickly, capturing every detail. "One thing keeps bothering me," Maya said, looking at Detective Rodriguez. "How many others has this happened to? People who didn't have the connections to fight back. People who just accepted this treatment because they felt powerless." Rodriguez nodded gravely. "That's exactly what we're going to find out. Your case might be the key to uncovering a much bigger problem." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the office windows, they could see Turner and Wilson being escorted to separate interview rooms by internal affairs officers. Their badges and service weapons had been taken, standard procedure during an investigation. The young officer who had originally texted Captain Kumar appeared at the door. "Sir, you need to see this. Someone posted a video of the traffic stop on social media. It's already got thousands of views." Kumar watched the video on the officer's phone, his expression unreadable. The footage was clear. Maya's professional demeanor, the officer's escalating aggression, the unnecessary force. Comments were pouring in, many from other medical professionals and citizens sharing similar experiences. "This stops here," Kumar said firmly, looking at his wife. "Not just for you, but for everyone who's ever been mistreated by officers who forgot their true duty." Maya stood up, her doctor's composure fully returned despite her ordeal. "Then let's make sure something good comes from this night. Real change, real accountability." The next few hours would be crucial. As Internal Affairs took statements, reviewed evidence, and dug deeper into Turner and Wilson's history, it became clear that this case would become a turning point for the department. The blue wall of silence was cracking, not through violence or scandal, but through the quiet strength of those who believed in doing what was right. And it all started because two officers couldn't see past their own authority to recognize the humanity of the person they'd sworn to protect and serve. The morning sun was just beginning to peep through the windows of the police station when the police chief arrived. News of the night's events had reached the highest levels of the department, and the chief's early arrival showed just how seriously they were taking the situation. "Captain Kumar," the chief said, walking into the conference room where Kumar was reviewing evidence. "I've seen the video. The mayor's office is already getting calls." He paused, looking at the stacks of complaints spread across the table. "How bad is it?" Kumar handed him a preliminary report. "Worse than we thought, sir. In the past 4 hours, we've uncovered at least 30 similar incidents. Most victims were too intimidated to file formal complaints." The chief sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "And Dr. Kumar? How is she?" "She's already back at the hospital," Kumar replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "She had scheduled morning rounds with her patients. Said she wouldn't let two corrupt officers keep her from her duties." In the hospital hallway, Maya was indeed making her rounds, though the events of the night were far from over. News traveled fast in both medical and law enforcement communities. Her colleagues kept giving her supportive looks, and several patients' families had seen the viral video. "Dr. Kumar," a nurse called out, hurrying up to her. "There's someone here to see you." A woman who says she had a similar experience with those same officers last month. "She was too scared to report it then, but after seeing your video." Maya took a deep breath. "Please take her information and direct her to Internal Affairs. Every voice matters now." Back at the station, Officers Turner and Wilson sat in separate interview rooms, their arrogance from the previous night completely deflated. The evidence against them was mounting by the hour. Detective Rodriguez walked into Turner's interview room, carrying a thick file. "So," he said, placing the file on the table, "let's talk about your traffic stop record for the past year. Interesting pattern here." Turner shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The statistics painted a damning picture of racial profiling and excessive force. His lawyer, sitting next to him, looked increasingly concerned. In another part of the station, Officer Chen was organizing video evidence from body cameras and civilian recordings. "Captain," he called out, "you should see this pattern." They turned their cameras off during specific traffic stops, but the dash cams were still running. The investigation was spreading beyond just Turner and Wilson. Questions were being raised about who had ignored the previous complaints, who had looked the other way, and why these officers had been allowed to continue their behavior for so long. A group of community leaders had gathered in the station lobby, demanding to speak with the chief. Among them was a retired judge who had been pushing for police reform for years. "This isn't just about two officers," the judge said firmly. "This is about a system that allowed them to operate with impunity until they happened to harass the wrong person. How many others have suffered in silence?" The chief nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We're launching a full departmental review. Captain Kumar will head the investigation, and we're bringing in external oversight." Meanwhile, Maya's phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages of support from colleagues and community members. But one message caught her attention. A thank you note from a young resident doctor who had been afraid to drive home late at night after hospital shifts, fearing similar police harassment. "Your courage in standing up to them gives us hope," the message read. Maybe now things will actually change. Captain Kumar spent hours in meetings with Internal Affairs, the police chief, and city officials. The case had grown beyond a single incident of police misconduct into a full investigation of departmental practices. We need to rebuild trust, Kumar explained in one meeting. Not with press releases and empty promises, but with real accountability and change. The day continued with a steady stream of new revelations. More victims came forward, encouraged by Maya's story. Other officers, tired of the department's reputation being tarnished by bad actors, began sharing their own observations of misconduct. What had started as a routine traffic stop had become a catalyst for change, forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about power, accountability, and justice. And at the center of it all was a doctor who had simply been trying to drive home after saving a life, unwittingly setting in motion events that would reshape an entire police department. 3 days after the incident, the investigation had taken over an entire floor of the police headquarters. Evidence boards covered the walls, filled with photos, statements, and timelines. Captain Kumar stood before them, reviewing the patterns that had emerged. "Look at this," Detective Rodriguez said, pointing to a map dotted with red pins. Each pin represents a complaint against Turner and Wilson. The concentration in certain neighborhoods can't be a coincidence. The investigation had uncovered a troubling pattern. Over 100 people had come forward with similar stories. Unnecessary aggression, ignored credentials, dismissed complaints. But what made this case different was that now people had hoped their voices would finally be heard. In her hospital office, Maya was reviewing patient charts when a nervous-looking woman knocked on her door. She recognized her as the nurse who had been present during her emergency surgery the night of the incident. "Dr. Kumar," the nurse began hesitantly, "I need to tell you something. Last month, those same officers stopped my brother. He showed them his military ID, told them he was just back from overseas duty. They treated him terribly. We tried to file a complaint, but nothing happened." Maya put down her pen. "Have you spoken to Internal Affairs yet?" The nurse shook her head. "I was scared. We all were. But seeing how you stood up to them, seeing that things are actually changing." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm ready to tell my brother's story now." Meanwhile, at City Hall, the police chief was meeting with the Civilian Oversight Board. The room was packed with community leaders, civil rights attorneys, and concerned citizens. These officers didn't just appear out of nowhere, one board member said firmly. They were created by a system that protected them. We need to address the root causes. The chief nodded, pulling out a thick report. "Captain Kumar's team has identified several critical failures in our oversight process. Officers with multiple complaints were routinely cleared without proper investigation. Warning signs were ignored. That stops today." Back at the station, Officer Chen was interviewing a former rookie who had briefly partnered with Turner. The young officer's hands shook as he described what he witnessed. "They had a game," he explained, his voice quiet but steady. "They'd bet on how quickly it could make someone resist arrest. I reported it to my surgeon, but was told to keep quiet if I wanted to keep my job. I transferred to another precinct the next day. The evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Records showed that Turner and Wilson had the highest number of use-of-force incidents in the department, yet had never faced serious consequences. Their supervisors had dismissed complaints, lost paperwork, and discouraged victims from pursuing cases. In the hospital cafeteria, Maya was having lunch when her phone buzzed with a news alert. The video of her arrest had sparked a national conversation. Other departments across the country were facing similar reckonings as people shared their own stories of police misconduct. "Your case was the tipping point," Captain Kumar told her that evening. People needed to see that change was possible. That speaking up could actually make a difference. The investigation had expanded beyond just 2 officers. Internal Affairs was now looking into supervisors who had covered up complaints, dispatchers who had selectively lost calls, and fellow officers who had remained silent. A group of medical professionals had started an advocacy group, sharing stories of harassment while traveling to and from emergency calls. Their testimonies painted a picture of systemic abuse that had gone unchecked for years. Remember, Maya told them during their first meeting, this isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what we did. It's about holding people accountable and creating real change. As the sun set on another day of investigation, Captain Kumar stood in his office, looking at a photo on his wall. It showed him and Maya at his police academy graduation, both young and idealistic about making the world better. "We promised to make a difference," he whispered to himself, turning back to the mountain of evidence on his desk. The path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, real change felt possible. The wall of silence was crumbling, and in its place, a new foundation of accountability and justice was being built. 1 week after the incident, the police department's largest conference room was packed for the disciplinary hearing. The tension in the air was thick as Officers Turner and Wilson sat before the review board, their once proud postures now defeated. Captain Kumar presented the evidence with methodical precision. "Over the past week, we've documented 157 complaints spanning 3 years. The pattern is undeniable." He gestured to the screen behind him, where statistics and testimonies scrolled past. These officers didn't just fail to protect and serve, they actively abused their authority. The police chief sat with the review board, his face growing grimmer with each new revelation. Body camera footage played on the screen, showing incident after incident of unnecessary escalation. The board members watched in silence as the evidence mounted. But perhaps most telling, Kumar continued, is what happened after these incidents. Complaints disappeared. Reports were altered. Witnesses were discouraged from coming forward. He placed a thick folder on the table. Until now. In the hospital across town, Maya was finishing her rounds when she received a text from her husband about the hearing. As she checked on her young patient from that fateful night, she couldn't help but reflect on how one incident had sparked such massive change. "Dr. Kumar," a voice called. She turned to see one of the hospital security guards, a former police officer himself. "I just wanted you to know what you did," standing up to them. "It's inspired a lot of us to speak up about things we've seen." Back at the hearing, Turner's lawyer was trying to defend his client's actions. "My client was simply following what he believed to be proper procedure." Proper procedure. Detective Rodriguez interrupted, standing up with a manual in hand. "Please show me where in our procedures it says to ignore medical identification, escalate without cause, and use excessive force on a compliant citizen." The room fell silent. Even Turner's lawyer seemed at a loss for words. One by one, witnesses came forward to testify. A military veteran described being harassed despite showing his ID. A nurse recounted being threatened during a late-night traffic stop. A young doctor shared how she changed her route home from the hospital out of fear. "These aren't just statistics," Kumar reminded the board. "These are real people whose lives were impacted by these officers' actions. People who were just trying to do their jobs, serve their community, live their lives." Wilson, who had been quiet throughout the hearing, finally spoke up. We got carried away with power," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "It started small, but each time nothing happened to us, we pushed a little further." Turner shot his former partner an angry look, but the damage was done. The admission hung in the air like a heavy cloud. The review board only needed 30 minutes to reach their decision. The chief stood to deliver their verdict. "Officers Turner and Wilson, your actions have brought shame to this department and violated the trust of the community we serve. Effective immediately, you are both terminated from the police force. Furthermore, all cases you were involved in will be reviewed for potential misconduct." But the chief wasn't finished. Additionally, 3 supervising officers are suspended pending investigation into their roles in covering up complaints. We are implementing new oversight measures, mandatory body camera reviews, and a civilian review board for all use of force incidents. As the room cleared out, Captain Kumar received another text, this one from Officer Chen. More officers were coming forward with stories of misconduct they'd witnessed, ready to help clean up the department. Outside the police station, reporters gathered as the chief held a press conference announcing the changes. Community leaders stood alongside police officials, a visual representation of the bridges being rebuilt. This isn't just about removing 2 bad officers, the chief declared. This is about changing a culture. About remembering why we took this job in the first place, to protect and serve everyone in our community equally and fairly. Maya watched the press conference on the hospital's break room TV, surrounded by colleagues who had supported her through the ordeal. The young resident who had been afraid to drive home nights was there too, tears in her eyes. "Things really can change," she whispered, squeezing Maya's hand. And change was indeed happening. What had started as one incident had become a catalyst for reform, proving that when people stand up for what's right, even the strongest walls of silence can crumble. 6 months after that fateful night, the police station looked different. Not just physically, with its new community engagement office and transparent complaint processing center, but in its entire atmosphere. The change was palpable in every corridor and every interaction. Captain Kumar stood before a group of new recruits in the training room, Maya by his side. The fresh-faced officers listened intently as he shared their story, now used as a mandatory part of training about accountability and proper conduct. "Power doesn't make you strong," Kumar explained, gesturing to the presentation screen showing footage from that night. "What makes you strong is knowing when not to use that power. Every person you stop is someone's family member, someone's colleague, someone who matters." Maya stepped forward, her white coat a stark contrast to the sea of blue uniforms. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty," she said softly. "I'm here to help you understand. That night, I wasn't just a doctor who saved a child's life. I was someone who needed help getting home safely. Every person you encounter has a story, a purpose, a life beyond that moment of interaction." In the back of the room, Officer Chen nodded. He had been promoted to head the new community relations unit, his quick action that night having marked him as someone who put integrity above rank. The changes weren't just local anymore. Police departments across the country had started adopting what they called the Kumar Protocol, a comprehensive system of accountability that included regular body camera reviews, civilian oversight, and mandatory reporting of all use of force incidents. At the hospital, things had changed too. A new police liaison office had been established, staffed by officers who understood medical professionals' unique challenges. No more would doctors and nurses fear late-night drives home after saving lives. "Remember that little boy?" Maya asked the recruits. "The one I operated on that night? He just celebrated his birthday. His parents sent me a photo." She showed them a picture of a smiling child holding a toy stethoscope. "Every time you put on that uniform, you have the power to impact lives like his. Use that power wisely." The training session ended, but the work continued. In another room, Detective Rodriguez was meeting with community leaders, reviewing the latest statistics. Complaints were down 70%, and when they did occur, they were handled transparently and promptly. "The real victory," Rodriguez explained, "isn't in the numbers. It's in the trust we're rebuilding. People aren't afraid to come to us anymore." That evening, Maya and Kumar attended a community forum. The same retired judge who had demanded change 6 months ago was there, but this time with a smile on his face. The room was filled with police officers, medical professionals, and community members, all working together to maintain the progress they'd made. A young officer raised her hand during the discussion. "What happens when we face resistance to these changes from other departments?" Kumar stood up. "Change isn't easy," he admitted. "But remember this, 6 months ago, one incident sparked a revolution in police accountability. not through violence or hatred, but through persistence and dedication to doing what's right. Maya added her perspective. In medicine, we have a saying, first, do no harm. Perhaps that should apply to law enforcement too. Every interaction is an opportunity to either help or harm. The choice is yours. The forum ended with a surprise announcement. The mayor had approved funding for a new training center, where police officers would work alongside medical professionals, social workers, and community leaders to learn comprehensive community engagement skills. As they drove home that night, Maya and Kumar passed the spot where she had been pulled over 6 months ago. A small memorial garden had been planted there, not to commemorate tragedy, but to celebrate change. You know what makes me proudest? Maya said, looking at her husband. It's not that we punished 2 bad officers. It's that we helped create a system where good officers can thrive. Kumar nodded, understanding completely. The night that could have broken their faith in the system had instead become the catalyst for rebuilding it. They had turned a moment of injustice into a movement for change, proving that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes. As they pulled into their driveway, another recruit class was graduating across town, ready to serve under the new protocols. The cycle of positive change continued, one officer, one interaction, one day at a time. The wall of silence had been replaced by a bridge of understanding, and the future looked brighter for everyone involved.